Chapter 1. Ma'am, you're already 6 months pregnant. The baby has fully formed. Are you sure you want to terminate the pregnancy? From the hospital's standpoint, we really don't recommend an abortion at this stage, the doctor said with difficulty. Grace subconsciously reached out to cover her already prominently swollen belly. She was 6 months pregnant now. A mother and child are bound by the heart. This little one had grown inside her womb, from a grain of rice to something so big. If she weren't truly in utter despair, what mother could bear to end the life of a child about to be born? After a stretch of heartbreaking silence, Grace took a deep breath and replied with absolute firmness. I'm sorry, baby. Mommy can't give birth to you, because mommy wants you to be born into love, not to face endless lies and hopeless hatred the moment you come into this world. After leaving the hospital, Grace lifted her head and saw the enormous electronic screen on the mall across the street, looping footage from yesterday's press conference held by the Chan Group. At the conference, a young reporter asked CEO Zachary Chan, Mr. Chan, as far as I know, the Chan Group has always been a giant in the electronics and jewelry industries. Why the sudden shift into the maternal and infant sector? On the big screen, Zachary was dressed in a bespoke suit, cool and refined. He smiled faintly and answered unhurriedly, because my wife is pregnant, and I don't feel comfortable using products from outside brands. The next second, Grace heard excited shrieks from nearby girls. Ah, what kind of fairy tale romance is this? Mr. Chan treats his wife way too well. Other wealthy husbands just buy cars or houses when their wives get pregnant. Mr. Chan goes all out and gives her an entire maternal and infant industry chain. Exactly. I heard that when Mr. Chan proposed. He promised he would never change after marriage and would always treat Mrs. Chan like a princess. Every year on her birthday, he prepares something special, crowns, diamond shoes. Those are child's play. One year he even bought an entire island and built a castle on it just for her. Listening to the girls' chatter, Grace gave a bitter smile. Never change? But Zachary Chan had already changed. Lost in thought, her phone suddenly vibrated. Grace picked it up and saw a text message from an unfamiliar number. Hey, Prego, guess where your husband is right now? Below the message was a photo. At a glance, Grace recognized the location. It was the underground parking garage of the Chan Group. Grace knew it was a trap. But sometimes people are like this, even when they know what lies ahead is a trap. They still jump in without hesitation. So she drove to the Chan Group. In the dim underground garage, Zachary's black Maybach was rocking violently. The two people inside clearly had no sense of shame. The window was still open. Pilar's fair, slender legs were stretched out of the window, black stockings torn to shreds hanging loosely from her thighs. At that moment, a large hand reached out from inside the car and grabbed Pilar's leg. Then Grace heard Pilar's syrupy voice, be gentle. I can't take it. Something bright stabbed painfully into Grace's eyes in the darkness. It was Zachary's wedding ring, designed by Grace herself. One of a kind in the world. And now, that ring was on the hand gripping Pilar's calf. Grace knew that hand well. It had once put a wedding ring on her finger. It had once washed its hands to cook for her. Every late night, that hand had held her as they slept. Every morning, its owner would bend down and give her a kiss. So amazing, no more. Spare your little bunny, okay? Pilar's sweet, cloying voice snapped Grace out of her memories. Grace raised a hand to touch her face and only then realized that, at some point, tears had already streamed down her cheeks. Grace knew the text message and the photo were both sent by Pilar. She also knew Pilar's intention: lure her here while she was heavily pregnant, provoke her into catching them in the act, push her emotions to the brink. If something went wrong, it could easily be 2 lives lost. That way, Pilar could step into her place openly and legitimately. A nice fantasy indeed. But Grace had no intention of going over to catch them. She silently returned to her car and then called Zachary. The call connected quickly. Zachary's breathing sounded slightly unsteady. Grace, I'm in a meeting right now. It's not convenient to talk. I'll call you back in a bit. Before he could finish, Grace cut him off coldly. Be home within 10 minutes, or you'll never see me again. Chapter 2. Grace, stop making a scene. This meeting is really important, Zachary said, a rare hint of panic creeping into his voice. Besides, there's no way I can get home from the office in 10 minutes. Grace replied coldly with just one sentence, the timer starts now. Then she hung up. Not long after, Pilar was shoved out of the car, clothes in disarray. Zachary drove the Maybach like it was a jet, within the blink of an eye. The car disappeared from the garage. Only Pilar was left behind, nearly naked, clutching her belongings, standing in the garage with humiliation written all over her face. Grace adjusted her seat, settling into a more comfortable position, then turned on her headlights. Her headlights were aimed straight at Pilar. The filth hidden in the darkness was instantly exposed to the light. Pilar panicked, hugging herself tightly. "Who's there? Who's there?" Grace couldn't be bothered to respond. She simply started the car and drove past Pilar with effortless composure. Through the open car window, Pilar caught sight of Grace's cool, breathtaking profile. Something inside her snapped. She screamed at Grace hysterically. "You washed-up housewife. Do you really think this means you've won? Don't dream. Your husband has been sick of you for a long time. He's told me more than once how disgusted he is by your bloated body." The only answer Pilar got was filthy exhaust fumes. Grace drove home. At home, unable to find her, Zachary was in a rage. "Useless idiots. You don't even know where Madam has gone. What good are you to me?" Grace walked silently into the living room. The moment Zachary saw her, all his anger vanished at once. He rushed over, pulled her into his arms, and said with lingering fear, "Grace, thank God you're still here. I thought you'd really run away from home. You scared me to death." Grace looked up at him and asked in a tone that was impossible to read, "Are you really that afraid of me disappearing?" "Of course," Zachary replied without hesitation. "Grace, you're the most important person in my life. I can't lose you. And now that you're carrying my child, I absolutely can't lose you." His tone was so sincere, his gaze so full of affection. If she hadn't just witnessed him having sex with Pilar in the car, Grace might have almost believed him. "Grace, promise me, you'll never leave me," Zachary said, gripping her hand tightly, his voice tinged with anxious desperation. "I can't live without you. If I lost you, I'd go crazy." A dense, piercing pain spread through her heart. With reddened eyes, Grace thought, "Then don't cheat. Entangled with another woman, yet saying over and over that you can't lose me. Zachary, which of your words are real, and which are lies? Why are you crying?" Noticing her reddened eyes, Zachary panicked. He coaxed her tenderly. "Who upset our Grace? Tell me, and I'll go settle accounts with them right now." Grace shook her head. "It's nothing, just pregnancy hormones." Still, Zachary couldn't rest easy and insisted on calling a doctor to examine her. But when the doctor arrived, Zachary looked distracted. He kept glancing at his phone, and each time he did, the desire in his eyes grew deeper. Grace understood immediately. Pilar was probably texting him again. Soon enough, Grace received a message herself from Pilar. "Prego, believe it or not, I can make your husband drop everything and come to me right now." She had barely finished reading when Zachary, sitting beside her, said impatiently, "Grace, there's an emergency at the company. I have to go back." Instinctively, Grace reached out and grabbed his hand. "Zachary, don't go. My stomach hurts. I'm scared. Stay and keep me company, okay?" Zachary showed a conflicted expression. At that moment, his phone vibrated again. No one knew what Pilar sent him, but after reading it, he pulled his hand free from Grace's and smiled as he soothed her. "There's a doctor here. Nothing will happen. Besides, I'm not a doctor. Staying won't help anyway. Be good and listen to the doctor. I'll be back soon." With that, he abandoned Grace and rushed off impatiently to meet his mistress. At that moment, Grace's heart died completely. She forced back her tears, took out her phone, and sent a message to her brother, who worked in the military. "Brother, I want to disappear completely." Chapter 3. Grace couldn't understand how everything had ended up like this. From getting to know each other, to falling in love, to getting married. She and Zachary had always been the envy of everyone around them, a fairy tale couple in the eyes of others. When Zachary proposed to her, he had held her hands and made a solemn promise. People say men change after marriage. But Grace, don't worry. Even after we get married, I won't change at all. I'll keep doting on you, indulging you, and letting you be a princess straight out of a fairy tale forever. After the wedding, Zachary truly lived up to that promise. He treated her with the same devotion as when he had been pursuing her, sending her flowers every day, preparing surprises from time to time. Anything she wanted would appear by her bedside the very next day without her ever having to say a word. It was as if he could read minds, effortlessly seeing through all her thoughts. Even her friends, those who loved joking from a male-supporting role point of view, praised her non-stop, saying she had found a husband who was truly 1 in a million. Yet why did such a 1 in a million husband still end up cheating? Was it really, as Pilar said, because after she got pregnant her body had gained weight and her figure had gone out of shape? Grace lowered her head and looked at her prominently swollen belly. Faint stretch marks had already appeared on it. Ugly, so ugly. But before pregnancy, she had been just like Pilar, with a slender waist and pale, flawless skin. Her abdomen hadn't been round and swollen like a watermelon, nor had it been marred by these unsightly stretch marks. How ironic. She had been willing to sacrifice her beautiful figure and endure all kinds of physical discomfort to carry Zachary's child, yet Zachary had cheated on her after she became pregnant. Madam, this is freshly stewed fish maw and black chicken soup. Your mother-in-law said it's good for the baby. You should drink it while it's hot, the housekeeper said, bringing over a tray. On the tray, besides the soup, there was also a plate of peeled walnuts and a large plate of grapes. Grace's mother-in-law believed that eating grapes would give the baby big eyes, and that walnuts were good for the brain. She wanted a smart, cute grandson with big eyes, so she instructed the housekeeper to watch Grace eat grapes and walnuts every day, at least one full plate a day. If Grace didn't eat them, a call from her mother-in-law would come immediately. I'm just telling you to eat grapes and walnuts. Anyone who didn't know better would think I was forcing poison down your throat. I'm doing this for my grandson. You're pregnant now. Not a young girl anymore. You can't be so selfish. You can't eat only what you like. You have to think more about the child in your belly. I'm doing this for your own good. Don't always think I'm trying to harm you. Her mother-in-law's words echoed over and over in Grace's mind. In the past, no matter how much she didn't want to eat, she would still force herself to do it just to avoid arguing with her. But now, take it away. Grace turned her face aside. I don't have an appetite. Even if you don't, you still have to eat. Your mother-in-law said all of this was air-shipped from abroad, pure and organic. It's good for the baby, the housekeeper urged, pushing the tray toward her again. At that moment, Grace's phone vibrated once more. Pilar had sent another provocative message. First, she sent Grace an address, then taunted her, Prego, do you dare to come? Grace instinctively clenched her phone. She couldn't stay in this house anymore anyway. She might as well go and see. Grace drove out, following the address Pilar had sent. In the end, she arrived at an auction venue. Grace frowned, wondering why Zachary would be meeting his mistress at an auction. But when she looked up, she saw Pilar arm in arm with a richly adorned, elegant lady, taking seats in the front row of the auction hall. That lady was none other than Grace's mother-in-law, Laura. Chapter 4. Pilar. If you see anything you like later, just bid for it. Mom will buy it for you, Laura said affectionately, holding Pilar's hand. The gentle warmth on her face was something Grace had never once seen directed at herself. Mom, why are you so nice to Pilar, but always sarcastic and cold toward Grace? Zachary asked helplessly. Grace is clearly your daughter-in-law. She's even carrying your grandchild right now. Can't you treat her a little better too? That's because Pilar won't be like that troublemaker Grace, always instigating you to go against me, Laura said darkly. Mom, I've explained so many times, Grace has never instigated anything, Zachary tried to explain, but Laura had already lost her patience. She interrupted him bluntly. Zachary, our family finally came out happily to shop. Can you stop bringing up that mood-killing woman? All right, I won't say anything. Zachary gave in with a smile. Today, I'm here solely to serve Her Majesty the Queen and Her Highness the Princess. I'll just pay and swipe my card, won't say a single unnecessary word. That single phrase, Her Highness the Princess, made Grace's eyes redden. She had once believed she was the only princess in Zachary's heart. Even if he had cheated now, at least the love he once gave her had been unique. But it turned out there had never been anything unique about it. Anyone could be the princess in his heart. Grace took a deep breath, forcing back the tears threatening to spill over, and turned to leave. But at that moment, Zachary saw her. Grace? Why are you here? Zachary's face instantly turned pale. He glanced at Pilar, his expression extremely unnatural. When did you get here? Grace didn't answer him. Instead, she asked calmly, shouldn't I be the one asking you that? Didn't you say there was an emergency at the company and that you had to go back to work overtime? Zachary made an appointment to meet a client here to discuss business. What's the problem with that? Laura snapped impatiently before Zachary could reply. You're pregnant. Stop being suspicious all day long. Taking care of the baby is what really matters. Mom, don't keep criticizing Grace, Zachary said, defending her. Grace feels insecure because I, as her husband, haven't done well enough. If I gave her enough security, why would she be suspicious at all? As he spoke, Zachary carefully took Grace's hand and placed it over his chest. Grace, I did arrange to meet a client here. The client is on the second floor. If you don't believe me, I'll take you to meet him. He gazed into Grace's eyes, his look filled with deep affection. Grace, when we got married, I promised you that I would love and cherish you forever and never deceive you. I always keep my word. Grace thought to herself, how does he do it? Saying such heaven-defying lies right in front of his mother, his wife, and his unborn child. Isn't he afraid of karma at all? Then who is she? Grace turned her head and looked at Pilar. She's Zachary's cousin. Their whole family moved abroad. So you don't know her? Laura said with a smile. Oh right. Zachary, your cousin just returned to the country and has nowhere to stay. Why don't you let her live at your place for now? She paused, then turned to Grace with a beaming smile. Grace, you wouldn't have any objections, would you? Chapter 5. Mom, don't joke around. Grace needs to focus on resting and taking care of the pregnancy. She doesn't have the energy to look after a cousin, Zachary said quickly when he noticed the look on Grace's face, stepping in to refuse on her behalf. But the very next second, Grace smiled. I don't mind. Let her move in. And just like that, Pilar moved in. That evening, the housekeeper came over again with a tray. On it were still the same 3 things as always: soup, walnuts, and grapes. Grace finally snapped. She flung the tray to the floor with her backhand. How many times do I have to say it before you understand? I don't want to eat. Zachary rushed over at once, looking tense. He pulled Grace into his arms. Grace, are you okay? Did the soup burn you? Grace shook her head and said nothing. Only then did Zachary let out a sigh of relief. He turned to the housekeeper and scolded her harshly. If Madam doesn't want to eat, then don't force her. Useless bunch, can't even take proper care of a pregnant woman. Is sister-in-law feeling nauseous? Pilar walked over, putting on a fake show of concern. How about I make you some appetizing soup? Tomato beef brisket soup. It's good for the baby and stimulates the appetite. Grace couldn't even be bothered to look at Pilar. She lowered her eyes and said, I'm tired. I'm going back to my room to rest. You all eat. With that, she turned and left. After falling into a hazy sleep, Grace was suddenly jolted awake by a shrill ringtone. She frowned, because she clearly remembered not setting any alarms before going to bed. Just as she was feeling puzzled, Pilar's provocative message came through again. Prego, do you dare to come to Zachary Gidge's study? Grace stared at the message for a long time. In the end, she still got up and went to Zachary's study. The door was left ajar. The moment she got close, Grace heard Pilar's coquettish laughter drifting out. Master, stop working and pay some attention to your good little bunny. Stop it. Zachary scolded in a low voice. This is home, not outside. What if Grace sees? Grace is already asleep. She won't know, Pilar said as she grabbed Zachary's hand and guided it downward. Master, little Pilar misses you so much, unbearably so. The darkness in Zachary's eyes deepened visibly. He flipped Pilar onto the desk and was about to undo his sleepwear when his movements paused. Wait, this nightgown you're wearing looks really familiar. Isn't this Grace's? Pilar sucked on Zachary's finger, her eyes full of seduction. That's right, it's Grace's, but she can't fit into it anymore. Zachary let out a low chuckle and reached out to pinch Pilar's slender waist. The moment his hand closed around her slim waist, the desire in his eyes grew even more intense. Grace still remembered, before she got pregnant, Zachary's favorite thing had been her slender, beautiful waist. Slim and firm, without a trace of excess flesh. Every time passion took over, he would grip her waist tightly. Now, Because of the pregnancy, she had become heavily pregnant, her waist no longer slim enough to grasp. He spoke words of concern for her, yet the moment he turned around, he went to grab another woman's waist instead. "Ah, Master, I love you so much. Do you love me?" Pilar seemed to glimpse Grace standing outside the door through the crack. She wrapped her arms around Zachary's neck and deliberately gasped as she asked, "Do you love me more, or do you love Grace more?" "Don't ask questions that only humiliate yourself," Zachary replied coldly. "The person I love most is of course Grace. She's my wife, the love of my life." Hearing that, Pilar shot a venomous, hate-filled glare toward the doorway. Unwilling to accept defeat, she asked again, "Then who do you love more in bed, me or Grace?" Zachary let out a low laugh. "Obviously you. That sexy body of yours was made to serve me." A victorious smile appeared on Pilar's face, and in that instant, Grace was already in tears. "Why cry?" she asked herself through her tears. "Didn't you let Pilar move in just to see how much sincerity Zachary still had left for you? Didn't you want to know whether he would cheat with his mistress right in the home you shared? Right under your nose? Now you have your answer. Congratulations, Grace. You have your answer." Chapter 6. Grace fell seriously ill. Her fever wouldn't go down, and she couldn't keep anything down, whatever she ate. She vomited right back up. "A bunch of quacks. I paid so much money to have you here, and you can't even cure a simple fever?" Zachary exploded in rage. If the butler hadn't stopped him, he might have started hitting people. "Madam is pregnant. There are many medications she can't take," the doctor said helplessly. "And your parents specifically instructed us not to prescribe Western medicine for Madam. The best option right now is dietary therapy, improving her condition through food." "But Madam isn't eating anything." Hearing this, Zachary carried a bowl of porridge to Grace's bedside. Holding her hand, he spoke in a near-pleading tone. "Grace, I'm begging you, for me, for our child, eat a little, okay?" Grace turned her face away and said nothing. In just a few days, she had become frighteningly gaunt. Her face was pale, her cheeks sunken, her whole body thin and frail. Only her abdomen was still unnaturally swollen. An alarming sight. "Grace, what's wrong with you?" Zachary said with reddened eyes. "What on earth happened? Tell me, please." Grace wanted to know too, what exactly had happened. Why had their once happy and perfect marriage turned into this? Why had Zachary, who once loved her so deeply, turned into a lying, cheating scumbag after she became pregnant? Who could give her an answer? "Grace, I'm begging you," Zachary cried as he held her. "As long as you're willing to eat properly, I'll do anything you ask. I can't lose you or the baby. If something happens to you both, I'll go insane." Grace forced herself to sit up. She thought, he's right. I can't let anything happen to me. If she died of illness now, then until the moment she closed her eyes, she would still be Zachary's wife. She didn't want to be his wife anymore. She wanted to leave him. So, enduring the nausea, Grace picked up the bowl of porridge and drank it. Seeing that Grace was finally willing to eat, Zachary was overjoyed. "Grace, you're finally eating. What else do you want? I'll have the kitchen make it for you." "No, I'll make it myself." But before Zachary's words had fully fallen, Grace vomited up everything she had just eaten. Her body was simply too weak. Even if she forced herself to eat, it was useless. Whatever went in would come right back out within a minute. With no other choice, Zachary sent Grace to the hospital for observation. Yet even after being hospitalized, Grace's condition remained poor. The attending physician said worriedly, "Mr. Chan, given your wife's current physical condition, it's really not suitable for her to continue the pregnancy. Otherwise, both the mother and the fetus will be in danger. I recommend inducing the early delivery. However, at her current stage, early delivery is still somewhat risky. It would be best to wait another half month, when the fetus is 6.5 to 7 months, before performing a cesarean section." "Will Grace be in danger if we do that?" Zachary asked nervously. "We're making this recommendation precisely based on the pregnant woman's current condition," the doctor replied. "Once the baby is delivered, we won't need to worry about the fetus anymore and can focus entirely on treating your wife without any interference." "Then I agree to early delivery," Zachary said without hesitation. "Get that little brat out as soon as possible." He's caused Grace so much suffering, I'll remember every bit of it. When he grows up, I'll definitely discipline him properly and avenge Grace." Those words deeply moved the young nurse standing nearby. She couldn't help saying to Grace on the hospital bed, "Your husband really loves you." Other men come with their wives for prenatal checkups. And the moment there's a problem, the first thing they worry about is always the baby. And even that's considered good. Many pregnant women come alone, their husbands don't care at all. Look at how much your husband cares about you. Just to spare you from suffering, he's willing to have the baby delivered even though it's only 6 months along. Grace smiled faintly but said nothing. Bringing a new life into the world should have been something sacred and joyful. So why was it that the pregnant women she saw, and she herself, were feeling nothing but pain at this very moment? Chapter 7. Grace had no intention of giving birth to the child. She quietly contacted her older brother, and under his arrangements, she was transferred to another hospital. "Grace, why the sudden transfer?" Zachary asked in confusion. "You're about to have a cesarean section. Changing hospitals at this point isn't a good idea." "Is it?" "The transfer was arranged by my brother," Grace replied calmly. "He said the doctors at this hospital work directly with the military and are more authoritative." Only then did Zachary feel reassured. If it was recommended by Big Brother, then there must be no problem. Grace's eldest brother had always been the authority in the family, and Zachary trusted him as well. And so, Grace was successfully transferred. The new hospital's treatment plan was still early delivery. The surgery would be performed the next day. Zachary canceled all his work and stayed in the hospital to accompany Grace through the delivery. "You don't have to do this," Grace said indifferently. "You're busy with work, right? It's fine even if you don't stay with me." She didn't really want to see him right now. "No matter how important work is, it's not more important than you," Zachary said tenderly. "You've suffered so much during this pregnancy. If I abandoned you at a time like this, would I still be human? I can't help with much else, but at least tonight I can stay and bring you water and take care of you." Grace didn't say anything more. Late at night, Grace needed to use the restroom. She struggled to get up, and when she turned on the light, she realized that the bed beside hers was empty. Zachary was gone. Grace vaguely guessed what had happened. She took out her phone and, sure enough, saw the room number Pilar had sent her, room 606. Grace followed the room number and soon heard Pilar's coquettish laughter drifting out. "Master, your little bunny is sick and needs you to use a big, thick syringe to give her a heart injection." "Are you crazy?" Zachary snapped angrily. "Why did you come to the hospital? Grace is having surgery tomorrow. She can't handle any stimulation right now. As long as we don't get caught, it'll be fine," Pilar said as she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Zachary's neck. Giggling sweetly, "Master, how about your little bunny puts on a nurse's uniform for you?" Zachary was clearly wavering. Seizing the moment, Pilar pressed on, sliding her hand into Zachary's pants. "Master hasn't released anything for so many days. You must be feeling awful, right? Let your good little bunny help you properly." Then she pulled down the zipper of Zachary's pants and knelt in front of him. Zachary's breathing gradually grew heavier. He no longer rejected Pilar, but instead followed his inner desire and pressed a hand down on her head. Soon, obscene sounds filled the hospital room. Grace closed her eyes and let the final tear fall. She said nothing. Silently, she went downstairs and called her brother. "Move the surgery up. I can't take it anymore. Take this child out right now. I don't want to be pregnant with his child for even one more minute." Everything about this made her feel utterly sick. Very quickly, all the preoperative preparations were completed, and Grace was wheeled into the operating room. Looking at her prominently swollen belly, a trace of reluctance rose in her heart. After all, she was already 6.5 months pregnant. The baby could even survive a premature birth. Was she really going to kill a child that had already fully formed? After a long silence, Grace decided to give Zachary one final chance to save their child. She asked the doctor to call Zachary and tell him that the surgery had been moved up. If Zachary immediately abandoned Pilar and came to accompany her through childbirth, she would give birth to the baby, then leave with the child. If Zachary didn't come, then she wouldn't keep the child either. She hadn't done anything wrong. She didn't want to bear the guilt of killing her own child. So she handed the choice to Zachary. "Zachary, if this child dies tonight, then it will be you who killed it with your own hands." Chapter 8. Mr. Chan. Your wife has suddenly developed a high fever and fallen unconscious. We can't wake her up no matter what, the doctor said anxiously as he called Zachary according to Grace's instructions. For your wife's safety, we have no choice but to move the cesarean section forward. Where are you right now? Please come immediately. What? The surgery's been moved up? Zachary's breathing was clearly unsteady. Okay, wait for me. I'll be there right away. At the same time, Grace made a video call to Pilar and started recording the screen. Pilar answered. As expected. Master, you're not going to leave me at a time like this, are you? Pilar said in a soft, aggrieved tone. We've only just started the foreplay, we haven't even gotten to the main part yet. There's no time, Zachary said as he hurriedly got dressed. Grace is about to give birth. I have to go be with her. You're not a doctor. What use is it for you to go? Pilar stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Zachary's neck. What Grace needs right now is a doctor. Not you, but your little bunny really needs you right now. As she spoke, she grabbed Zachary's hand and guided it beneath her. Don't believe me? Touch and see. Zachary's throat bobbed. Stop it. Grace has suffered so much to give me this child. If I don't stay with her when she gives birth, what kind of man would that make me? But Grace has already fainted. Even if you rush over now, she won't wake up, Pilar said, standing on her tiptoes and breathing softly into his ear. And with a cesarean section, the doctors won't let you into the operating room anyway. You'll only be waiting outside. Since you'll just be waiting, why not stay here and give your feverish little bunny a shot? Besides, Grace has already passed out. She won't know. That final sentence completely convinced Zachary. Zachary flipped Pilar over and pinned her beneath him. Fine. I'll cure your fever properly today. At that moment, Grace's heart died completely. She ended the video call and said to the doctor, do it. The cold forceps for induced labor probed into Grace's body. Even though she had already been given anesthesia, the pain was still so intense she could barely breathe. The surgery lasted more than an hour. In the end, the child was gone. Grace lay on the hospital bed, drenched in cold sweat. The sheets beneath her soaked through. Miss, your brother has already prepared a passport, visa, and a new overseas identity for you. The doctor told her. The plane is ready as well. There's a professional medical team on board. If you want to leave, you can do so tonight. After you leave, your domestic identity will be cancelled immediately. From that moment on, Grace will officially no longer exist. Grace closed her eyes and finally revealed the first genuine smile she had shown in a long time. I want to leave now. All right, we'll make the arrangements immediately, the doctor replied solemnly. Before boarding the plane, the doctor asked Grace, how would you like us to handle the fetus? Give it to Zachary, Grace said weakly. When you do, tell him this, I was originally going to give birth to this child. As long as he had truly kept his promise and stayed by my side during the delivery, this child would have lived. But he didn't. When both the child and I needed him the most, he was with Pilar. He killed his own flesh and blood. After that, Grace was carried onto the plane by the medical team. Before takeoff, Grace took out her phone and sent Zachary the video she had just recorded, along with all the provocative messages and videos Pilar had sent her over the past few days. After sending them, she asked a nurse to throw her phone away. The cabin door slowly closed. Then came the sensation of weightlessness. The plane was about to take off. Through the window, Grace took one last look at the city. Zachary, farewell. Don't come looking for me, and don't apologize, because I do not forgive you. Chapter 9. The plane pierced through the clouds and soon disappeared into the pitch-black night sky. On the other side, Zachary finally stopped. After more than 2 hours, a deep sense of satisfaction spread through him, from the inside out. Yet along with that satisfaction came a faint trace of guilt. Cheating was one thing, but tonight was the night Grace was supposed to undergo a cesarean section. People always said that when a woman gives birth, it's like walking through the gates of hell. And yet, when Grace was stepping into that hell, he hadn't been able to resist temptation. The more Zachary thought about it, the more he felt like a complete piece of trash. But he didn't want to be like this either. He was a man. He had physical needs. Grace had been sick lately, and he'd stayed by her side the whole time. He hadn't had any chance to go outside and find another woman to deal with those needs. He'd been holding it in for a full week. If he kept holding it in, he'd suffocate. Things like this, it was better to release than to repress. The more you held it back, the stronger the urge became. Once you've finally satisfied it, the desire would fade. Zachary justified himself over and over in his mind. He had merely made a mistake that men all over the world made. It was nothing. Besides, whenever he found women outside, it was always just physical, never emotional. His heart had always belonged to his wife. So this didn't even count as cheating. Taking care of physical needs couldn't be called infidelity. Only betraying someone emotionally was true betrayal. A momentary slip of the body was nothing more than animal instinct. After comforting himself like this, Zachary felt much better. As he quickly got dressed, he pulled out his phone and called his assistant. Assistant Zhang, I don't care what time it is, get up right now. Find a way to get me the most expensive set of jewelry possible. I mean a full set. Not just one piece, necklace, bracelet, earrings, even an anklet. It has to be with diamonds. The bigger and rarer, the better. Price is not an issue. Have it delivered to me first thing tomorrow morning. Grace has given birth. When she opens her eyes tomorrow, I want the first thing she sees to be the gift I got her. And also prepare gold bracelets, longevity locks, and things like that for the baby. Buy all the gold jewelry as matching mother and child sets. Whatever the baby has, my Grace must have the same set. I want Grace to know that even after having a child, she is still the only princess in my heart. The person I love most will always be her. In my heart, she will always come first. The child can only come second. After giving his instructions, he hung up. Strangely enough, spending money really did work wonders. The guilt weighing on his heart instantly lightened. By then, he was already fully dressed. Earlier, when he'd been entangled with Pilar, Zachary had deliberately taken off his suit and folded it neatly to the side, afraid it might get dirty or wrinkled and leave clues that a clear-headed Grace might notice. Now, as he put it back on, the suit was still crisp and immaculate. The moment he slipped into it, he once again assumed the polished demeanor of an elite businessman. From the outside, there was no sign at all that he just cheated. You're leaving already? Seeing him about to go, Pilar couldn't help pouting. Her tone was thick with jealousy as she said, It's always like this, you sleep with me and then you leave. What exactly am I to you? Zachary, who had already reached the door, stopped. He turned around and looked at Pilar coldly. Know your place, he said flatly. To me, you're nothing. The only reason I keep you around long term is because you have more tricks in bed. Don't delude yourself into thinking I'll ever fall in love with you. I've told you many times, there's only Grace in my heart. It can only hold Grace. There's no room for a second woman. Chapter 10. After coldly throwing out those words, Zachary left. All that remained was Pilar, clothes in disarray, collapsing onto the floor with hatred filling her heart, raging helplessly. After leaving, Zachary rushed straight to the operating room. However, the surgery had already ended. The vast operating room was empty except for nurses busily cleaning up. Grace and the doctors were nowhere to be seen. Zachary was stunned. What's going on? Where's Grace? Where's the baby? Miss Nurse. A completely at loss Zachary could only force himself to ask. The doctor just called me and said my wife was having surgery here. But why is there no one here now? Where's my wife? Where's the baby? And where did the doctors who operated on my wife go? The nurse lifted her eyelids and shot Zachary a glance, then asked coldly, You're Grace's husband, right? The surgery was 3 hours ago. Why are you only here now? Zachary couldn't very well say that he'd been fooling around with his mistress at the time, so he casually lied. I had an urgent matter at the company. Before he could finish fabricating his excuse, the nurse cut him off directly. That's hilarious. You busy big shot. Do you even know what time it is now? 4:30 in the morning. What kind of company do you work for that starts business at 4 in the morning? Zachary had been born into a wealthy family and later became a rising star in the business world. From childhood to adulthood, he had lived amid flattery and deference. When had someone ever mocked him so sarcastically like this? Who do you think you are? Daring to lecture me? Zachary Chan's face darkened, his tone icy. Our Chan group has countless multinational businesses. Ever heard of time differences? It's 4 in the morning here, but in country K, it's already 9 in the morning. He paused, then said impatiently, You should be grateful that my wife just gave birth today. I don't want to waste time arguing with someone like you on such an auspicious day. Call your hospital director. You're not qualified to speak to me." At that moment, a cold, steady male voice suddenly came from behind Zachary. "She's not qualified, then am I qualified?" Zachary froze, spun around abruptly, and stared in disbelief. "Big brother? Why are you here?" Standing behind Zachary was none other than Grace's brother, David. David was a soldier. Most of the time he stayed in the military, only returning home briefly during the new year. Even Grace herself rarely saw him, so Zachary was naturally shocked to see David here. "Humph, my sister giving birth, there has to be a man capable of handling things standing guard," David said coldly. "Since you couldn't do it, of course I had to." Every word dripped with dissatisfaction toward Zachary. An awkward expression appeared on Zachary's face. His wife giving birth while he wasn't even waiting outside, it really was indefensible. It was only natural for his brother-in-law to be angry. "This is all my fault." Faced with David, a soldier, Zachary couldn't muster any arrogance at all. He lowered his head and admitted his mistake. "When Grace was giving birth, I should have stayed by her side every step of the way. But big brother, if you say I didn't stay with Grace at all, that really would be unfair to me." Zachary hurried to explain. "During the days Grace was sick, I never left her side. If you don't believe me, you can ask Grace. At night, I stayed right by her bed. The moment there was any movement, I'd get up immediately to bring her water or take care of her. These past few days, I was constantly with Grace and had no time to deal with Chan Group affairs. As a result, the company fell into chaos. A multinational project ran into serious trouble. The investors from Country K were furious and insisted on a video call, saying they wanted to hold an emergency meeting. But the signal in the hospital corridors was terrible. There was no way to make a video call. I really had no choice. I could only go downstairs first to deal with those foreigners. I finished the video meeting as fast as I could and rushed back without stopping, but I didn't expect that I'd still be a step too late. Grace's surgery had already ended. Chapter 11. To be honest, Zachary's lie was not only poorly made, but also full of obvious loopholes. The signal in the hospital corridors was indeed bad, but the VIP wards had wireless internet. If he truly needed to get online urgently, there was no need for him to go downstairs at all. He could have simply gone into one of the rooms next to the operating theater and connected to the Wi-Fi. Moreover, foreigners were people too, not cold-blooded monsters. No country with basic humanity would force a man to abandon his wife while she was giving birth just to attend a meeting. Country K was a developed nation, and people there placed great importance on family values. Such a situation was even more impossible. David listened quietly as Zachary spun his lies. To be honest, for a fleeting moment, David almost couldn't resist the urge to rush forward and punch the scumbag hard. But he held himself back. That punch would come sooner or later, but not now. "Big brother, I really know I was wrong. You can hit me, scold me, I'll accept it all." Zachary once again put on that deeply affectionate expression, lowering his stance. "But big brother, I'm begging you, tell me where Grace is. Ever since she went into the operating room, I haven't seen her again. Is she okay now? Has she woken up? If she wakes up and doesn't see me, she'll definitely be heartbroken. I'm begging you, big brother, let me see Grace. After I see her, no matter how you punish me, I won't complain. As long as I can see Grace, I'm willing to do anything." In fact, as early as when Grace had brought Zachary home to meet the family, David hadn't liked this brother-in-law very much. How should he put it? He felt Zachary was too fake. What normal man talked like that? Sweet words rolling off his tongue nonstop, without even feeling embarrassed. But back then, Grace and Zachary were deeply in love, and during the relationship, Zachary really did treat Grace well. In front of her, he showed none of the airs of a wealthy heir. Whenever they went out, he would carry her bag for her. He didn't mind eating leftovers Grace had touched. He'd take them and eat them himself without hesitation. Whatever Grace wanted, no matter what it was, he would always find a way to get it for her. Over time, David's view of his future brother-in-law gradually softened. But who would have thought that before long, this man would reveal his true colors? Sure enough, people should trust their instincts. Sometimes, first impressions are actually the most accurate. He never should have let his sister marry this man. David forcibly suppressed the fury boiling in his chest. He took a deep breath, then said coldly, "Don't worry, Grace and the child are both fine. Mother and child are safe." "Really?" Zachary's face lit up with uncontrollable joy. "Where is Grace now? Can I see her?" "No," David replied expressionlessly. "Grace just had surgery and needs rest. Go home first. Go back and make proper arrangements. Tomorrow, I'll personally bring the mother and child home." "Arrangements?" Zachary froze, clearly not understanding what David meant. "My sister risked her life to give you a son," David said coldly. "Aren't you going to hold a banquet to welcome her and the child home?" "We will. Of course we will." Zachary nodded repeatedly. "I'll call my whole family over. Our entire family is extremely grateful to Grace for giving birth to our child. Invite more people and make it presentable," David added calmly. "Both my family and the Chan family are prominent families in a city. Don't make it look cheap and embarrassing." "Don't worry, big brother. I'll make sure everything is arranged perfectly," Zachary promised again and again. David curled the corner of his lips slightly. "Then I'll see you at the banquet tomorrow." Chapter 12. Although at this very moment Zachary desperately wanted to see Grace, when he looked at David's resolute, stern face, he silently swallowed all the words he wanted to say. To be honest, he was a little afraid of his brother-in-law. How should he put it? Perhaps because David was a soldier, there was a kind of unquestionable authority about him. Even though Zachary had fought his way through the business world for years and had seen all kinds of people, he was still intimidated by the powerful aura David exuded. "Then I'll go back and make the arrangements first," Zachary said before leaving, squeezing in another show of affection. "If Grace wakes up, please tell her that I love her very much and really want to see her. I'll be waiting for her at home." David felt like throwing up just watching him. Sure enough, the more a man cheats, the better he is at pretending to be deeply devoted. Truly decent men usually have little romantic experience and rarely interact with women. Even if they like someone deeply, their mouths are clumsy, no matter how hard you press them. They can't squeeze out a single sweet word. Only seasoned players who have been through countless relationships can speak such heartfelt, fluent words of love. Because all of that was practiced on mistresses, David's gaze gradually turned icy. His hands, which had been empty just moments ago, now held a phone after Zachary left. That phone was clearly not David's. "Send it to the tech department and crack the password." David tossed the phone to his subordinate and gave a cold order. "Copy everything related to Zachary's infidelity onto a USB drive. I'll need it tomorrow." It was Zachary's phone. During their conversation earlier, David had quietly taken it from him. His sister was soft-hearted and didn't want to personally tear apart a cheating bastard, but as her brother, he wouldn't let this trash off so easily. Beating him up would be far too lenient. David intended to completely ruin him. Pressed for time, Zachary began arranging the banquet the moment he got home. David would be coming tomorrow, and Zachary didn't dare slack off. After all, he hadn't been guarding the operating room today and was already at fault. If he also messed up the welcoming banquet, he would truly never be able to hold his head up in front of his brother-in-law again. So regardless of the hour, Zachary forcibly woke all the household staff. Those who needed to shop went shopping. Those who needed to clean cleaned. Those who needed to decorate decorated. Everything had to be ready before David brought Grace and the child back in the afternoon. At the same time, he called his parents and told them to invite all the Chan family's relatives and friends to attend, to make the banquet look grand. Grace just had a cesarean section. Can she really be discharged so soon? Laura asked skeptically. And the baby was premature. Shouldn't he be kept in the hospital for observation? After all, Laura had given birth herself, so she couldn't help voicing her doubts. Zachary, however, dismissed them casually. Other people can't be discharged because they don't have the conditions. Their homes have nothing. So after giving birth, their wives can only recover in the hospital. But our family has private doctors, private clinics, and top-tier maternity nannies. Isn't staying at home far more comfortable for Grace than staying in a hospital? Big Brother has been to our house and knows all this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to let Grace be discharged so quickly. Hearing her son say this, Laura finally felt reassured. She snorted coldly, then said with obvious displeasure, "Humph, Grace. That useless thing, wasn't it just a pregnancy? Fever, no appetite, one problem after another." My poor eldest grandson, being cut out at just over 6 months. She just gave birth. So I won't say anything now, but if anything happens to my grandson's health in the future, I absolutely won't let that delicate little slut off the hook. Chapter 13. Although Laura didn't like Grace, she still cared deeply about the child in Grace's belly. After all, this was her first grandson. From the moment Grace became pregnant, Laura had been looking forward to the day she could hold her grandson in her arms. Zachary had never dared to tell his parents about the premature birth, because he knew very well, if he did, they would never agree to it. Compared to Grace's health, the two elders cared far more about the child in her womb. Although modern medical technology could already ensure that premature babies grew up healthy, the older generation didn't believe in that. In their eyes, premature babies were inherently weak. Only babies born at full term were truly healthy. It didn't matter if the mother suffered more, what mattered most was the child's health. So even if Grace had already been critically ill back then, Zachary's parents would never have allowed an early delivery. They would have had doctors pump Grace full of nutrients and force her to stay pregnant for a few more months, at the very least, until she carried the baby to 9 months. Zachary understood his parents far too well. That was precisely why he hadn't dared to mention the premature birth. Only after Grace had successfully given birth did he dare to reveal the truth. When she learned the truth, Laura exploded with anger over the phone. But the cesarean had already been done, and the baby had already been born. No matter how furious she was, it was useless now. Zachary kept soothing his mother over the phone, saying things like the baby was very healthy. There were no problems at all, and as long as they followed the doctor's instructions, the child would grow up no differently from a full-term baby. Even so, the fire in Laura's heart didn't subside in the slightest. She didn't say anything out loud, but she had already made up her mind. Once David left, she would definitely find an opportunity to deal with Grace severely and avenge her poor grandson. The banquet was being prepared in a flurry of activity. Laura summoned her circle of wealthy socialite friends, while Zachary's father, Diego, invited his business associates. Everyone gathered together, chatting and laughing, all eagerly waiting to see the baby as soon as possible. Only your Zachary dotes on his wife enough to agree to a premature birth. If it were my family, my son would rather die than allow his wife to deliver early. Premature babies really aren't ideal. I've heard that many of them have weak constitutions. Laura, you really need to find a chance to talk some sense into your daughter-in-law. The child is already premature, raising him later can't be sloppy. He must be breastfed. Don't let her force the baby to drink formula just because she's afraid her figure will go out of shape. Babies raised on breast milk are always stronger than those raised on formula. That's right. Breast milk is a must. You can't give in to your daughter-in-law on this matter anymore. Premature babies are already fragile if you don't breastfeed. What will happen to their health when they grow up? Laura's friends chattered away among themselves. They hadn't even met Grace yet, but they had already planned out how she should raise her child in the future, and Laura listened to every word. She secretly made up her mind. After David left, she would definitely have a proper talk with Grace. She would force Grace to breastfeed. If she didn't have enough milk, she would have to eat foods that stimulated lactation and nourish her body. Even if she couldn't eat, she would still have to force it down. This time, she absolutely would not allow that delicate woman to ruin her grandson's health again. When will the baby get home? We can't wait anymore, someone urged with a smile. We've prepared so many gifts for the baby. This was clearly Grace's welcome banquet. Yet most people had only prepared gifts for the child. As for Grace, why would a woman need gifts after giving birth? So pretentious. In fact, most of them had come to see the baby, not Grace. Young master, I think I see Mr. David's car. That black SUV, that's his, right? Under everyone's eager gazes, David finally arrived, driving over with the baby. Chapter 14. The black SUV stopped in front of the villa gates. The moment it came to a halt, a crowd rushed over. They're here. They're here. The baby's finally home. I heard it's a boy. He must be as handsome as Zachary. As soon as I heard Grace was pregnant, I had 2 little gold bracelets made. Today I can finally put them on the baby. Under everyone's eager gazes, the car door slowly opened. David stepped out, carrying a portable baby stroller in his hands. Zachary's child lay inside that stroller. The sight of the stroller sent waves of excitement through the crowd. But David's presence was so imposing that Despite everyone desperately wanting to take a look at the baby, not a single person dared to step forward. In the end, it was Zachary who went up first. "Big brother, why are you alone? Where's Grace?" Zachary asked anxiously. "Didn't she come back with you?" Hearing this, David curled his lips slightly. The man who was usually stone-faced actually showed a rare smile. "Grace couldn't come today. She asked me to bring the child back to you. Why can't Grace come?" Zachary didn't care about the child at all. He grabbed David's arm, his face full of worry. "What happened to Grace? Was there a problem with the surgery?" David didn't answer. At that moment, Zachary's parents came over. Zachary might not care about the child, but his parents cared deeply. In fact, they had only deigned to attend today's welcome banquet because they wanted to see their grandson. If Grace had been discharged alone, without a child, they wouldn't have come at all. "Child's uncle, you must be tired carrying the stroller all this time," Laura said with a beaming smile. "Give the baby to me. Thank you for taking care of Grace and the child in the hospital. Now that you're home, you can finally relax. I'll take care of the baby." As she spoke, Laura reached out to take the stroller from David. David's lips curved into a cold arc. He didn't refuse and directly handed the stroller to her. This stroller had a canopy. Once the canopy was pulled down, the inside was completely concealed, and nothing could be seen. At this moment, no one knew what the baby inside looked like. Laura took the stroller eagerly. The instant it was in her hands, her group of wealthy friends swarmed over. Earlier, when David had been holding the stroller, they hadn't dared to approach. Now that Laura had it, they could finally take a good look at the baby. "Big brother, say something." Zachary was still relentlessly pressing about Grace. "What exactly happened to Grace? Didn't you say you'd bring her back today? Why is Grace?" Before he could finish speaking, a piercing scream suddenly came from behind him. "Aw, what is this?" Surrounded by her friends, Laura impatiently lifted the canopy of the stroller. The last layer of concealment was torn away, and the brutal truth was laid bare before everyone's eyes. There was no adorable baby in the stroller. There was only a transparent glass jar, and inside that jar lay the child Grace had lost just yesterday. This was the grandson Laura had been longing to see. Chapter 15. Hearing his mother's scream, Zachary turned around in shock. At that moment, the group of wealthy ladies gathered around the stroller all screamed and scattered, terror written all over their faces as if they'd been badly frightened. Laura's legs gave out completely, and she collapsed onto the ground. Zachary rushed over to help his mother up. "Mom, what's wrong? Why do you look so pale?" Laura only felt her vision going black. Trembling, she raised a finger and pointed at the stroller, her voice shaking. The baby. At that moment, David strolled over as well, lowering his long lashes. He glanced at the stroller and said with a half smile, "Zachary, aren't you going to take a look at your newborn son?" Only then did Zachary realize something was terribly wrong. His face went deathly pale as he stepped forward, one step at a time, until he stood in front of the stroller. And just as he lowered his eyes to look inside, Laura, who had finally regained her senses, let out a heart-rending wail behind him. "My grandson!" In that instant, Zachary saw it clearly. What lay inside the stroller was not a cute newborn baby, but a transparent glass jar containing his son's corpse. Zachary's heart clenched violently. His eyes turned bloodshot as he spun toward David in rage, then lunged forward and grabbed David by the collar. "David, what the hell do you mean?" Zachary's father, Diego Chan, also strode over with a dark expression, furious beyond restraint. "Where is Grace? Tell her to get out here. Our Chan family has treated her well. How could she do something so insane?" The guests immediately began whispering among themselves. That's right, who in a city doesn't know how desperately Zachary loves Grace? If Grace wanted the stars in the sky, Zachary would probably climb up and pluck them down for her. Then why would Grace abort the child? Zachary treats her so well, she had no reason to do this. Killing her own flesh and blood without hesitation, how cruel. The baby was already over 6 months along, fully formed, even able to survive premature birth. What kind of woman could do something this heartless? Amid the chorus of condemnation, both Diego and Zachary straightened their backs even more, as if righteous indignation had given them moral high ground. Zachary still tried to defend Grace. With a dark expression, he questioned David. Grace would never do something this cruel. David, did you force Grace to have an abortion? You're the child's uncle. How could you do something so utterly inhumane? Diego also spoke sternly. Ever since your sister married into our family, Zachary has treated her like a princess. Our whole family has treated her like a treasure. She hasn't suffered or worked hard a single day in our household. I can swear on my conscience to everyone here, the Chan family has never done anything to wrong your sister. And now, the two of you siblings actually conspired together to murder my unborn grandson. You must give me an explanation for this. That's right, you must give us an explanation. Laura, supported by her friends, stood up from the ground, wiping her tears as she pointed at David and demanded, "Where is Grace? Tell her to come out. I want to ask her myself, how has our Chan family wronged her? Why would she do something like this?" Faced with everyone's accusations, David remained utterly calm. He slowly took out a USB drive. "There's no need for my sister to show herself," David said evenly. "I'll tell you all right now why my sister aborted this child." As he spoke, he nodded to his subordinates. Immediately, they carried a projector out of the SUV. David inserted the USB drive into the projector and began the playback. What appeared on the screen was the result of an entire night's work. A full, unedited record of Zachary's infidelity. Chapter 16. Every time before Pilar seduced Zachary, she would send Grace provocative messages, luring her over to watch the live show. Her original intention was to use this to stimulate Grace, ideally to provoke this heavily pregnant woman into miscarrying on the spot. Of course, if Grace happened to hemorrhage during the miscarriage and die in the hospital, that would be even better. What Pilar didn't know was that every time she used those provocative videos to lure Grace into watching, Grace would take out her phone and record the scenes of her and Zachary sleeping together. Moreover, in the hospital David had arranged for Grace, every ward had surveillance cameras installed. That hospital served the military directly and was not open to the public. During that period, there were no wounded soldiers at all, so the wards were empty. David had long anticipated that when Zachary was staying in the hospital with Grace, that bastard wouldn't be able to restrain himself from cheating, so he ordered his men to install extremely well-hidden surveillance cameras in all the unoccupied wards. He wanted to capture every ugly moment of Zachary in the highest possible resolution, and then expose those moments to the world. After recording what he needed, David had his men remove all the cameras. No other patient's privacy was violated. So the moment the projector turned on, Pilar's seductive face appeared on the screen. She was wearing Grace's nightgown, lying bonelessly beneath Zachary. "Master, be gentler. I really can't take it anymore." Zachary, on the other hand, looked utterly aroused as he viciously grabbed Pilar by the waist. He sneered coldly. "Weren't you the one who clung to me first? Now you're saying you can't take it? Ha! You light the fire yourself, you put it out yourself." This single scene stunned everyone present into silence. Isn't that Zachary in the video? What's going on? Did he cheat? No way. Zachary is a well-known devoted husband in a city. How could he possibly cheat? My God, so all that doting husband image was just an act? Unbelievable, lavishing love on his wife online while keeping a mistress behind her back. What kind of trash behavior is that? Didn't the Chan family always boast about their good family values? This is the fine son they raised? The moment the video played, the public opinion instantly reversed. The crowd that had just been condemning Grace for being cruel immediately turned on Zachary instead. David let out a cold laugh. "Don't rush, this isn't even the most exciting part yet. Why don't you all guess what Zachary was doing while my sister was lying on the operating table, about to undergo a cesarean section?" As soon as those words fell, Zachary's face turned deathly pale. "Enough!" He rushed forward, trying to shut off the projector. "I forgive Grace for aborting the child. Stop playing it, don't show any more." But how could this projector be turned off just because he wanted to? With one hand, David slammed Zachary to the ground. "Scum, what right do you have to forgive Grace?" David stepped on Zachary's face, looking down at him from above, his voice icy. "Stay right there, the video isn't finished yet." The next moment, the footage switched to the operating room. Grace lay on the operating table. On the screen, she was so thin she barely looked human. Her face was deathly pale, her voice weak, yet she still forced herself to speak to the doctor. "Wait, don't start the surgery yet. Call Zachary. Tell him I'm about to give birth." If he can come right now, I'll give birth to this child. But if, even now, when I need him the most, he's still clinging to his mistress and refuses to come, then abort the child. After saying that, she closed her eyes. A single, cold tear slid down from the corner of her eye. Chapter 17. The very next second after Grace's tears fell, the camera abruptly cut to Zachary. At that exact moment, Zachary was in a high-end hospital ward, playing an explicit naughty nurse roleplay with Pilar. The instant this scene appeared, the crowd erupted in fury. Even Zachary's own relatives couldn't help but curse him inwardly, scumbag. As for the other guests, they didn't hold back at all. My God, is Zachary even human? His wife is lying on the operating table giving birth, and instead of staying with her, he's sneaking around with his mistress. This is the so-called model husband voted online? The universally acknowledged good man? What a joke! Disgusting. Now I finally understand why Grace aborted the child. If it were me, I'd abort it too. I would never give birth to a child for a man this vile. Hearing everyone hurling insults at Zachary, Laura couldn't sit still anymore. She spoke up to defend her son. This video is obviously edited. Zachary may have made mistakes, but I know the son I gave birth to. I'm willing to stake my life on it. My Zachary would never fool around outside while his wife was giving birth. This is malicious editing. It's blatant slander. But before Laura could finish, the next second, Grace's video call connected. Pilar answered without the slightest hesitation. She smiled seductively at the camera, her eyes full of provocation. That was the final nail in the coffin. Videos could be edited, but the video call between Grace and Pilar during Grace's delivery clearly proved that during that exact time frame, Zachary was fooling around with his mistress. Laura's face instantly turned ashen. She shot a vicious glare at Pilar on the screen. Who would have thought this little tramp wasn't harmless at all? She actually dared to answer Grace's video call at a moment like this. Wasn't she deliberately ruining her son? My God, this is beyond disgusting. The son cheats, and instead of disciplining him, the mother keeps covering for him. This whole family is suffocating. The more I see this, the more I understand Grace. Thank goodness she aborted the child. Otherwise, wouldn't she have been bullied to death by the Chan family? Did you notice? When David first played the cheating videos, everyone was shocked, but Zachary's parents showed no surprise at all. What does that mean? It means they knew long ago that their son was keeping a mistress. That realization triggered another wave of shocked gasps. Everyone couldn't help but sigh. This family was truly suffocating. The son cheated. The entire family helped cover it up, putting themselves in Grace's shoes. How desperate must she have been? At that moment, the video cut again, this time to the auction house. At the auction venue, Pilar was affectionately linking arms with Laura. The two of them looked incredibly close, as if Pilar, the mistress, was the true daughter-in-law. Oh my God! Isn't that woman holding Laura's arm the same mistress Zachary cheated with? His parents really did know. Absolutely disgusting. So picky and harsh toward their own daughter-in-law, yet so kind to the mistress. Like crooked beams make crooked houses. Zachary turning out like this, his parents are definitely to blame. But this still wasn't the most explosive part. The most explosive moment came at the very end of the video. At the end, Laura said smugly, "Oh right, Zachary. Your cousin just returned from abroad and has nowhere to stay. Why don't you let her live at your place for now?" Grace, you wouldn't have any objections, would you? Chapter 18. This part, Grace hadn't recorded on video, only Laura's voice. After all, Grace herself had been present at the time and couldn't exactly point the camera at Laura to film her. But even just the audio alone was already explosive enough. My God, did I hear that right? Laura actually suggested that the mistress move into her son and daughter-in-law's home? What on earth was she thinking? Is that something a normal human being would do? And she even lied to Grace, saying the mistress was Zachary's cousin. Seriously, I'm speechless. What kind of mother does that? Could it be that Laura thought Grace was pregnant and couldn't serve her son anymore? So she found a young, pretty mistress to take care of him instead? What era are we even living in? Is Laura insane? In modern society, there are still mothers who personally send a concubine to their son while the daughter-in-law is pregnant. This whole family is just full of freaks. The video finally came to an end, and with it, the Chan family's reputation was completely dragged through the mud. But this was only the beginning. David had no intention of letting this family of scumbags off so easily. My sister actually loved her child very much. After discovering Zachary's infidelity, she suffered. She was lost. She hesitated. She even thought about whether she should give birth to the child and raise him on her own. David said in a low voice, "What mother doesn't love her own child? That child was inside my sister's body. She nurtured it with her own flesh and blood. If she hadn't truly been driven to utter despair by this family, how could she have had the heart to abort a child she had carried for 6 months? Even when she was already on the operating table, my sister still wanted to give Zachary one last chance. She told me herself, if Zachary had abandoned the mistress and rushed over to stay by her side, she would definitely have given birth to the child." But what did Zachary do? He's worse than an animal. No person with a shred of conscience would abandon their wife at such a moment, but he did. So the real killer of this child was not my sister, nor the doctor who performed the surgery, but Zachary himself. He personally killed his own child. This video, I will upload it online. David said coldly, "Zachary, don't you like to brag about how devoted you are? Today, I'll let the whole world see just how deeply devoted you were to my sister." With that, David pulled out the USB drive and turned to leave. The moment they heard David say he was going to post the video online, Zachary's parents panicked. They hurriedly tried to stop him. "David, this is just a private matter between Zachary and Grace. Why would you post it online? Family matters should be handled within the family. Grace and Zachary aren't even divorced yet. If this blows up and everyone knows about it, that won't be good for Grace either." "Exactly. If there's a problem, we can sit down and talk it out slowly. Don't be so extreme. Husband and wife share honor and disgrace. One prospers. Both prosper. One falls. Both fall. Even for Grace's sake. You can't do this." But no matter how earnestly the old couple tried to persuade him, David didn't waver in the slightest. His sister had long since stopped wanting to live with Zachary. As for shared honor and disgrace, whatever losses the Chan family suffered had nothing to do with his family at all. This video, he was absolutely going to expose it. Seeing David about to walk away with the USB drive, Diego and Laura completely panicked. Their faces darkened as they barked orders at the servants. "What are you all standing around for? Hurry up and go over there," snatch that USB drive from his hands. Chapter 19. However, Diego and Laura had greatly overestimated their household staff. David and his men were all trained soldiers. How could ordinary people possibly stop them? David didn't even need to lift a finger. With just one subordinate stepping in, all of the Chan family's servants were knocked to the ground. Now things were even worse. Not only did they fail to snatch the USB drive, but Diego and Laura's ugly behavior was captured on video by many of the guests present. Once those clips were uploaded online, the Chan family would be humiliated yet again. Amid the chaos, David drove off in his SUV with effortless composure. Laura, meanwhile, collapsed onto the ground, completely losing control as she wailed, "Heavens above! What are we supposed to do now? Their family is trying to drive us to death. You useless piece of trash!" Unable to catch David, Diego redirected all his fury onto Zachary. He charged forward and slapped Zachary hard across the face. "Your wife was lying on the operating table, risking her life to give birth to your child, and you were out fooling around with another woman? How could you do something so utterly heartless?" Zachary didn't say a word. He stood there stiffly, not dodging at all, taking Diego's slap head-on. In fact, ever since David had pinned him to the ground and stepped on his face earlier, Zachary had been in the same dazed state. It was as if his soul had left his body. His mind was completely blank. People around him were cursing him non-stop. Yet not a single word registered, because all he could think about at that moment was, so Grace had known all along? That must have been why she had grown thinner and more haggard by the day. She hadn't been sick. She had simply withered away in pain. He had always believed he'd hidden everything perfectly, but there was no such thing as a wall that never leaked. He'd been exposed long ago, only he himself hadn't realized it. "I'll beat you to death. You worthless bastard." Diego's fist came down again. He was trying to stage a display of righteous anger in front of everyone, hoping to salvage a shred of the family's reputation. But this performance was utterly useless. In everyone's eyes, the Chan family no longer had any reputation left to salvage. Yet that punch jolted Zachary awake. It was as if his soul snapped back into his body. and clarity returned to his eyes. Grace! I have to find Grace. Blood seeped from the corner of Zachary's mouth where his father had struck him, but he didn't bother wiping it away. Like a man possessed, he muttered to himself, "She must be heartbroken right now. I need to find her immediately and explain everything to her. I don't love Pilar at all, I was just tempted by that vile woman. My heart belongs to Grace. I've only ever loved Grace my entire life." These bizarre words stunned everyone present into silence yet again. Unbelievable, he's been caught cheating red-handed. And he's still putting on an act of devotion? Zachary, don't you feel sick saying things like that yourself? This is the first time I've ever seen someone cheat while simultaneously making a heartfelt confession to his wife. Ha, he's played the devoted husband role for so long that he actually believes it himself now. Yet Zachary had no attention to spare for the crowd's ridicule. At that moment, Grace was the only thing on his mind. He wanted, no, he needed, to see her immediately, to admit fault, to apologize, to beg if necessary, even if it meant kneeling down and pleading. He didn't care. As long as Grace would forgive him, he was willing to do anything. Chapter 20. Zachary rushed to the hospital at once. He naively believed that Grace was still hospitalized there, unaware that while he had been entangled with Pilar, Grace had already boarded a plane to a foreign country. "Let me in. My wife is inside. I need to see my wife." The moment he arrived, Zachary clashed with the security guards at the gate. This hospital served only the military and was not open to the public. Previously, Zachary had been allowed in only because David had given special instructions. Now that David had revoked that privilege, Zachary was naturally barred from entering. Zachary tried to make a scene at the hospital entrance, but the security guards here were no retired old men. They were all former soldiers transferred from the army, strong, disciplined, and well-trained. If it weren't for hospital regulations forbidding them from laying hands on civilians lightly, Zachary would have been beaten flat long ago. When brute force failed, Zachary switched tactics. He shouted loudly at the hospital gate, "Grace, I know you're inside. I know you don't want to see me right now, but I have to see you. I need to explain everything from beginning to end. If you won't come out to see me, then I'll stay right here and wait until you're willing to come out and see me." And so, Zachary began a standoff with the hospital. Every day he waited outside, hoping to see Grace change her mind, afraid that Grace wouldn't know he was waiting for her. He even spent money to buy an oversized loudspeaker. Every day, facing the ward where Grace had once stayed, he shouted love confessions at the top of his lungs. "Grace, you're the only one in my heart. I truly love you. Please, come out and see me. Grace, I know I was wrong. As long as you can forgive me, I'm willing to do anything. Grace, I'm begging you, come out and see me. You can hit me, scold me, but please, don't punish me like this." Every time Zachary shouted through the loudspeaker by the hospital's back wall, security would come to drive him away. But even when he was chased off like a lunatic, Zachary never wavered. He stubbornly returned again and again, continuing to shout into the loudspeaker. Finally, after all his persistence, a graceful figure appeared behind him. Zachary's eyes lit up instantly, his expression turning excited. He spun around eagerly and, almost on instinct, wrapped his arms around the person behind him. "Grace, that's wonderful, wonderful. You've finally agreed to come out and see me." But after hugging her in overwhelming excitement, Zachary realized the person in his arms was not Grace. It was Pilar. "What are you doing here?" Zachary's face turned cold at once. He shoved Pilar away and said with undisguised disgust, "Get lost. I don't want to see you." Pilar's eyes immediately reddened, holding back tears. She said, "Zachary, why can't you understand? Grace doesn't love you at all. She's not worth you treating her this well. I'm the one who truly loves you. I didn't get together with you for your money. I genuinely like you." Zachary froze, then seemed to recall something all of a sudden. His gaze turned icy. "Heh, I almost forgot. If it weren't for you, Grace would never have found out about my cheating." Zachary's face darkened, his expression terrifying. Step by step, he walked toward Pilar, his fists silently clenching tighter and tighter. "You shameless bitch. How many times did I warn you not to show off in front of Grace? And yet you were so ungrateful. you actually dared to text Grace to provoke her, and even answered her video call while she was giving birth. Chapter 21. Pilar. You looked pretty smug in that video. Did you really think that once Grace left me, you could smoothly take her place and become my wife? Heh, what a beautiful dream. How could I ever marry someone like you, something anyone can have? In my eyes, you're no different from the women who sell themselves in nightclubs. I just slept with you a few more times, and you actually started taking yourself seriously? Zachary grabbed Pilar by the throat. His chest was full of vicious rage with nowhere to vent, and Pilar had walked straight into the line of fire. He slammed her against the wall, beating her furiously while spewing abuse without restraint. Bitch, you even dared to provoke Grace? Who gave you the nerve to challenge Grace? A filthy, low woman like you isn't even qualified to be compared to Grace. In my eyes, you're not worth even one of Grace's toes. Being compared to trash like you is an insult to her. Just hitting her wasn't enough. Zachary yanked Pilar by the hair and smashed her head against the wall. I'll teach you not to know your place. I'll teach you to provoke Grace. You must have water in your brain if you really thought a man of my status would ever marry garbage like you. Again and again, her head slammed into the wall. Soon Pilar was bleeding profusely, tears pouring down her face as she sobbed and begged. Woo-woo. I won't dare anymore. I really won't. Please spare me. Master, please. Spare me. The moment Pilar called him master, the anger Zachary had just barely suppressed flared up again. He slapped her hard across the face. Shut up. Don't call me that. It's disgusting. He had once loved hearing her call him that in bed. Now, he found it revolting. The slap sent Pilar crashing to the ground. She lay there clutching her face, crying weakly. But her pitiful appearance earned not a shred of mercy. Zachary stepped forward and began kicking her viciously in the stomach. Bitch, this is all your fault. If you hadn't shamelessly shown off in front of Grace, Grace would never have aborted our child. You're the one who killed my son. You're the real culprit. I'll beat you to death today and avenge my son. Zachary struck without restraint. Very quickly, Pilar was beaten until she was covered in blood, barely clinging to life. Passers-by began gathering around, watching the chaos unfold. Some younger onlookers suddenly exclaimed, "Hey, I recognize that guy. He's that cheating scumbag Zachary who's been all over the internet lately. Wasn't Zachary supposed to be the national good man? How did he turn into a cheating bastard? Do you guys live under a rock? This already blew up. He cheated while his wife was pregnant. Videos are all over the internet." Yeah, I saw them too. The Chan family is absolutely unhinged. His mom even lied to her daughter-in-law, saying the mistress was Zachary's cousin, and let the mistress move right into their house. Disgusting. How can people like this even exist? While Zachary was losing his mind at the hospital, David had already uploaded all of the cheating videos online. This time, Zachary and Pilar were truly infamous. Netizens everywhere recognized this pair of despicable lovers. Zachary's image as the national good man completely collapsed, replaced by his new title in everyone's mouths, a top-tier scumbag. And it didn't stop there. Because the Chan family's behavior was so revolting, the Chan group was immediately hit with a massive online boycott. Consumers refused to buy any Chan group products. Those who had already purchased them demanded refunds en masse. Overnight, the Chan group's stock price plummeted. The Chan family suffered catastrophic losses. Chapter 22. During this period of time, Zachary's mind had been filled with nothing but Grace. He had been losing his mind around the hospital, so he had no idea what was happening online. Now, hearing the passers-by's discussions, Zachary finally belatedly remembered that before leaving, David really had said he would upload those videos to the internet. Zachary hurriedly took out his phone. Sure enough, with just one search, he found the videos of his infidelity all over the web. When David uploaded the videos, he had only blurred Grace and the doctors who performed Grace's surgery. As for Zachary and Pilar, he hadn't censored them at all. Their faces were shown clearly and openly. The moment the video went live, it caused a massive uproar online. Netizens immediately began hurling abuse at the despicable pair. I never would have imagined that national good man Zachary was actually this kind of person behind the scenes. This is disgusting. I actually used to like him. Now seeing the vile things he did makes me feel like I swallowed a fly alive. Heh. I said it long ago, Zachary definitely has a performative personality. What normal man acts like him? Flaunting his affection nonstop and spewing cheesy love talk at every turn? It was nauseating. Even as a man, I can't stand this. What kind of top-tier scumbag cheats with a mistress while his wife is giving birth? And this guy was called a national good man? He doesn't deserve it. National good man? I think he should change his name to National Trash Man. In an instant, the tide of public opinion completely turned. At first, Zachary had been the perfect husband in the hearts of countless women. Under every one of his lovey-dovey videos, there were endless comments calling him husband, and some women even tagged their boyfriends, bitterly asking, "Why can't you love me the way Zachary loves Grace?" The men, fed up with these comparisons, had always said that Zachary was obviously acting. There was no way a man like that existed in real life. But when they said that, their girlfriends naturally didn't believe them, and many couples even fought over it. Now that Zachary's image had completely collapsed, the men finally felt vindicated. They flooded the internet saying they had known all along that Zachary was no good, just a show-off pretending to be devoted. The deeper the act, the filthier he was behind the scenes. Zachary fell from national good man to a universally reviled national trash man overnight. Men even joked about expelling him from the male population altogether. His behavior was simply too embarrassing for them. Staring at the overwhelming flood of insults online, Zachary nearly blacked out and fainted on the spot. Back then, he had relied on his devoted husband persona to turn the Chan Group into a household name, a beloved, conscience-driven company. He himself had risen to become a rising star in the business world, the pride of his parents. But now, everything was ruined. At that moment, rage completely devoured Zachary's remaining sanity. He lunged forward, once again pinning down Pilar, who was collapsed on the ground and unable to get up, and began beating her like a madman. It was all this woman's fault. If she hadn't repeatedly provoked Grace, none of this would have happened. Grace wouldn't have aborted the child. He wouldn't have lost Grace. He and Grace would still be the model couple everyone admired online. The Chan Group would still be a beloved, respected company. But now, all of it, everything, had been destroyed by a shameless mistress. Zachary was almost driven insane with fury. Grabbing Pilar by the head, he slammed it against the wall over and over again. "You bitch! It was you! You ruined everything! I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" Chapter 23. Pilar was already covered in blood. Yet Zachary still refused to stop. His eyes were bloodshot, as if he truly meant to beat Pilar to death right there on the street. In the end, it was only thanks to the hospital's security personnel arriving in time and restraining Zachary that a tragedy was avoided. Otherwise, in his blind rage, Zachary might really have beaten Pilar to death on the spot. However, although the security guards stopped him in time, Zachary's violent assault in public had already been filmed by onlookers and uploaded online. As a result, Zachary's name once again dominated the headlines of major news outlets, this time with an even more sensational title. Zachary loses control, brutally assaults mistress in public, nearly causes a fatality. This time, things were truly disastrous. When the infidelity scandal first broke, Diego had spent a large sum of money trying to suppress the news to prevent it from spreading further. Yet before the cheating scandal had even fully died down, the video of Zachary beating Pilar in the street surged to the top of every major media platform. Diego was so enraged that he suffered a heart attack and collapsed unconscious on the spot. Zachary, meanwhile, was taken into custody by the police on charges of intentional assault. Laura cried until her face was streaked with tears and mucus. She sought out a lawyer and sobbed as she asked what could be done. Normally, in cases like this, if the victim is willing to settle, you can resolve it by paying compensation and having the victim withdraw the charges, the lawyer said with a troubled expression. But now, footage of Mr. Chan assaulting someone in public has already spread across the internet. It's everywhere, videos of him beating Pilar in the street. This case, I'm afraid it won't be easy to close. That alone was already bad enough. But a few days later, even worse news came from the hospital. Pilar had suffered repeated, severe blows to the head. By the time she was rushed to the hospital, her condition was already critical. Despite the doctor's desperate efforts to save her, they ultimately failed. Pilar died in the hospital. With that, the nature of the case changed completely. Zachary's charge escalated from intentional assault to premeditated murder. When Laura heard the news, Her vision went black, and she collapsed unconscious on the spot. Now Diego was in the hospital undergoing emergency treatment for his heart attack. Zachary was being held in police custody, and Laura cried until her eyes were swollen and nearly blind, yet she was utterly helpless. With no one left to rely on, Laura forced herself to pull together. No matter what, she had to get her son out of prison first. After all, she only had this one son, and the Chon family only had this single bloodline. The Chon bloodline could not end here, so Laura took out all the family's remaining savings and begged the lawyer repeatedly. "Lawyer Lin, I'm begging you, please save my son. I only have this one son. I can't let him rot in prison. As long as you can get my son out, I'm willing to pay any amount of money." Lawyer Lin wanted to take the case, but the problem was that Zachary had beaten Pilar in public. And while doing so, he had repeatedly shouted, "I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" Those words had been heard by many people and even recorded on video, which was then uploaded online. If it weren't for those words, Lawyer Lin might have been able to argue that Zachary had no subjective intent to kill, that he had acted impulsively and accidentally caused Pilar's death. A crime of passion carries a lighter sentence, and with good behavior in prison, Zachary might have even qualified for a reduced sentence and been released in just a few years. But unfortunately, while assaulting Pilar in public, Zachary had repeatedly yelled, "I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" Too many people had heard it. There was even video evidence. Under these circumstances, Lawyer Lin could no longer argue that it was an impulsive killing. What could have been classified as a crime of passion was now clearly premeditated murder, and premeditated murder could carry the death penalty. Chapter 24. The moment Laura heard the words death penalty, her vision went black again, and she nearly fainted on the spot. Fortunately, Lawyer Lin said that as long as they were willing to throw enough money at the problem, Zachary might still have a slim chance of survival. "Lawyer Lin, as long as you can save my son, I'm willing to spend any amount of money," Laura said hurriedly. "Even if I have to sell my house, I'll do it. I have to save my son." Lawyer Lin then told Laura that the only remaining option was to bribe the hospital into issuing a diagnosis stating that Zachary had mental problems. Murder committed by someone deemed mentally ill would not carry criminal responsibility. That way, Zachary would be sent to a psychiatric hospital instead of prison. Once Mr. Chan is confined to a psychiatric hospital, we can then find a way to get him out, Lawyer Lin said. But during this process, a lot of money will be needed to grease the wheels. If you really want to save your son, you'd better start raising funds immediately. So Laura rushed home and sold off her jewelry, luxury handbags, and even one of her villas, everything at low prices. Things progressed fairly smoothly. After all, before the incident, Zachary had repeatedly stood outside the military hospital with a loudspeaker, shouting like a madman. Laura also bribed a shady hospital. Its doctors claimed that Zachary had suffered a mental breakdown after the double blow of losing his beloved wife and his long-awaited son. They issued a psychiatric evaluation certifying that Zachary had already been mentally unstable when he assaulted Pilar. And just like that, Zachary was sent to a psychiatric hospital. The next step was to find a way to get him out. Unfortunately, the matter soon reached David's ears. And even more unfortunately for Laura, David happened to know the director of that psychiatric hospital. So David gave a cold laugh and had his subordinate pass along a message to the director. "Tell him, he can take the money, but the man is not to be released. Since Laura insists her son is insane, then let him stay in the asylum for the rest of his life." This move was exceptionally ruthless. The director of the psychiatric hospital was a seasoned fox. He knew exactly how to deal with a woman like Laura, someone willing to give up everything for her child. Now the Chan family had completely fallen from power. Laura still had some money, but no influence or backing. To the director, she was nothing more than a fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered. As long as he kept dangling hope in front of her, making her believe that pouring in more money would eventually get her son released, she would keep selling off everything she owned and funneling money into the asylum. And the director could simply take the money without ever doing anything. After all, Laura didn't dare sue him. Once she did, the truth about Zachary faking mental illness would come out. With multiple charges added together, Zachary would be finished for good. For the sake of her son, no matter how unwilling or bitter she felt, Laura could only grit her teeth and swallow everything whole. After all, sometimes, it really does take an evil person to punish another evil person. And so, Laura kept pouring money into the psychiatric hospital, desperately trying to get her son out. While on the other side, Diego remained hospitalized due to his heart condition, requiring exorbitant medical fees just to stay alive. Money was being devoured on both fronts. Laura had been a pampered wealthy lady all her life and had no ability to earn money. Very quickly, she squandered all of the Chan family's remaining assets. One villa after another was sold off. In the end, Laura moved out of her luxurious mansion and into a dark, cramped rental apartment. The rental was filthy, foul-smelling, and infested with cockroaches. Laura lived each day drowning in tears. Zachary's life in the asylum was no better. At first, he still clung to hope, waiting for his mother to rescue him. But year after year passed, and he remained locked inside the psychiatric hospital. A psychiatric hospital was no better than prison. Patients were forced to take medication every day. These drugs affected the brain, while they could calm actual patients. When taken by a normal person, they slowly dulled the mind, making one increasingly less like a normal human being. Let me out! I'm not mentally ill. I'm a normal person. In the beginning, Zachary resisted fiercely, but for patients who became too emotionally agitated, the asylum resorted to electroshock therapy. After enduring electroshock treatment for a period of time, Zachary gradually became obedient. Perhaps it was from living among the insane for too long, or perhaps it was the effect of the drugs, but Zachary's mind slowly began to break. He no longer resisted. He no longer thought about escaping. Like the other patients in the hospital, his eyes became dull and lifeless, his expression empty. Grace. Grace. I love you. He even began muttering to himself. Occasionally, when he saw a young and pretty nurse, he would rush over and confess passionately, Grace, you're finally willing to see me. That's wonderful, truly wonderful. He got exactly what he deserved. Zachary truly went insane, and he would spend the rest of his life in the asylum. As for Grace, after leaving Zachary, she did go through a period of depression, but with the companionship of her parents and friends, she gradually emerged from the shadows. Her brother hired the best nutritionists for her. After a long period of recuperation, both her body and her heart were finally healed. After recovering, she began a new life abroad. She made many friends and had no shortage of admirers. But for now, Grace had no intention of entering a new relationship. She planned to travel the world with her close friends. The world was vast. She wanted to see it. She later learned about the tragic fate of Zachary's family through friends, but she no longer cared at all, because life is like a dream and she had already awakened from her nightmare. Only Zachary remained, trapped alone in his own nightmare, forever unable to wake up.